In our previous film about the pre-Columbian indigenous civilizations of America, we discussed the Mayan and Incan roads. Around the world, such roads were exclusively built for wheeled carts, to prevent the wheels from getting stuck in loose soil, especially after rains. However, only Native Americans used these roads as pedestrian walkways, according to scientists, because they lacked draft animals. To pull these carts, horses, donkeys, and large cattle appeared in America along with the Europeans. However, if Europeans didn't have draft animals, they would be no different from the natives. Existence determines consciousness. Scientists are claiming that pre-Columbian South American natives built pedestrian walkways in deserted areas, such as the mountains, and these walkways were up to 4 meters wide and thousands of kilometers long. This claim is so glaringly and overtly contrary to common sense that it becomes difficult to find words to express the outrage. Are modern scientists so foolish and blind that they fail to see these roads were linked to mines, quarries, and seaports? These were the roads through which American gold and silver were transported, sent by Europeans across the ocean to their final destinations in Europe and Asia. In South America, one of the first cities to be established was the port of Lima, 1533, which served as the Catholic capital of South America in the 16th and 17th centuries. A little later, the port of La Serena, 1544, was built along with several other small port cities on the western coast. The Inca Road in the southern region concludes at the El Chivado gold mine, with its development commencing in 1692, coinciding with the construction of this southernmost segment of the road. Moving towards the north, the Inca Road terminated at the city of Pasto, located in the province of Popayan in New Granada, which is now known as the state of Colombia. The province of Popayan, emphasis on the last syllable, is famous for becoming a supplier of various cereal crops, as well as horses and large cattle from the middle of the 16th century. And of course, its main value to European colonists was its rich gold deposits. The province of Popayan had many similarities with the province of Santiago de Chile in terms of gold mining and horse breeding, and both were part of the Inca road system. I will quote from the latest Universal Geography, published in Moscow in 1816. Among the minerals in Chile, there is gold, abundant and of the purest quality, found both in the mountains and rivers. Additionally, there are deposits of silver, gold and copper, iron ores of exceptional quality, lead, mercury, native sulfur, lake and spring salt, saltpeter, ammonium chloride, alum, and even oil. The animals brought here from Europe have greatly improved and multiplied. Horses, with their beauty, vigor, and durability, surpass the Andalusian breed, from which they are descended. Additionally, the cattle in the mountains are notably large, while the sheep possess exceptionally white and long wool. Furthermore, these sheep give birth twice a year. The city of Potosi, currently located in Bolivia but formerly part of Peru prior to Simon Bolivar's revolution, stands as the most valuable location on the Inca Road and perhaps even within the entire Spanish Empire. It is believed that until the mid-18th century, the mines of Potosi provided about half of the world's silver production. Situated at an altitude of 4,000 meters, the city itself is surrounded by vast stretches of barren land, with very few plants able to survive aside from rare mountain vegetation. Scholars have no clear answer as to why the natives built a road in these lifeless places before the arrival of Europeans in Potosi. I can only recite the fairy tale about the Indians and the Silver Mountain. This story was concocted by historians themselves, but no earlier than the 18th century. Huayna Capac, the 11th ruler of the Inca Empire, was born in 1476 and deceased in 1527. He saw our famous hill. Amazed at its grandeur and beauty, he spoke with his courtiers. He said, "This hill will undoubtedly have much silver in its depths." For this reason, he ordered his vassals to extract the precious metal. They did so and, bringing their tools of flint and strong wood, climbed the mountain, and after this, a voice was heard that said, "Do not take the silver from this mountain, as it belongs to other owners." Following this event, the natives never set foot on this mountain again until the arrival of the Europeans. This is an adult fairy tale. It tells of how the Incas, unfamiliar with iron, the wheel, or even the potter's wheel, came to mine silver ore. They used stone tools, presumably stone axes, in a high-altitude area where food or fuel for cooking and heating was scarce. Every necessity for survival in these regions had to be carried for hundreds of kilometers. What's striking is the scholar's reasoning. According to the legend, this mountain did not yield any silver to the natives. Yet, the natives still constructed a pedestrian road to it. This was at an altitude of 4,000 meters, or 13,000 feet. The road also passed through neighboring ancient Incan cities. These included Potosi, Paria, and Tupiza, all situated at similar high altitudes. Notably, near the Incan city of Paria lies the city of Oruro. The city was founded by the Spaniards in 1606 as a center for silver mining. Tupiza city is even more interesting. We open the newspaper Peruvian Mercury, a publication from Lima at the end of the 18th century. I quote, "Tupiza is located 60 leagues away from Potosi, serving as the capital of the district. The residents of the area, including a few Spaniards, live off the gold and silver mines of Corami, Estarqui, and other places, and also work as drovers. The local agriculture is relatively poor due to the climatic conditions, managing to yield just a quantity of corn, wheat, and potatoes. So, the city lived off supplying neighboring gold and silver mines. Agriculture in these parts was challenging, but mines and quarries needed to be supplied with fresh food. That's the first point. Secondly, there were only a few Spaniards living in the city, the rest of the town's inhabitants were natives. This explains the mystery of native cities with purely native architecture and pagan temples, which historians later called Pre-Columbian cities. We will separately discuss the mysterious architecture of the Incas. By the way, the miners of Potosi, as if 500 years of Christianization of Latin America never happened, still worship the idols of local native gods, to whom they offer sacrifices in the form of cigarettes, alcohol, and coca leaves. 300 years ago their distant ancestors built their pagan temples, and the Spaniards and the church turned a blind eye, operating on the principle that it didn't matter which gods the Native Americans believed in, as long as they worked in the mines and plantations. So in America, with the help of native labor, the Spaniards created a unique self-sufficient system for extracting and delivering to Spanish ships a rich cargo of gold, silver, precious stones, and other minerals that were highly valued in Europe and Asia. The primary countries for gold and silver mining in Latin America were Mexico, originally called New Spain, and Peru. And it is these territories are the birthplace of the so-called pre-Columbian urban civilizations of the Maya, Aztecs, and Incas, whose states were conquered by the Spanish. By coincidence, these countries also house the Catholic capitals of North and South America, Mexico City and Lima. Quoting a source from the end of the 18th century, Lima, the residence of the Viceroy, the capital of Peru, and of the Spanish Empire in South America. This shows the importance attributed to Peru, the number one country for silver mining at that time. Another interesting coincidence is that in these Spanish colonies in Mexico and Peru, and especially in Peru, scholars believe there was already fairly developed agriculture even before the arrival of Europeans. While in the rest of pre-Columbian America, the Native Americans were only engaged in hunting and gathering, which is the most primitive stage of development of human society. Yet in other parts of America, such as modern USA, Brazil, and Argentina, there were much better places for farming. Moreover, according to scholars, the most complex forms of agriculture were found in the mountains, where the climate and soil for growing crops were not the best. However, these areas were near the Spanish silver mines. Even though the harvest in these places was poor, the miners still needed to be fed. So, it became necessary to build expensive terraces for growing fresh fruits and vegetables. Today, most of these terraced farms are in decline or at best serve as tourist attractions, as historical heritage of the Incas, because it's cheaper to transport food to these places by car or rail than to engage in such costly and low-yielding agriculture in mountainous areas. But until the 20th century, there were no practical alternative to these terraces. Scholars seem unable or unwilling to draw the straightforward conclusion that Native Americans, Aztecs, Maya, and Incas, together with Europeans, created the infrastructure of America. Despite their different cultural values, they found a common language when it came to the creation and distribution of material values. The incalculable wealth of America. Europeans and Native Americans together built the first cities in the New World, in which the Indians erected their pagan temples. This is the city of Tenochtitlan, now Mexico City. However, scholars resist the idea that the Native Americans could have built their temples in the presence of Europeans, because in such a case they would have to acknowledge that Catholic missionaries, mainly Dominicans and Franciscans, were not primarily concerned with the Christianization of the Indians, but rather, with preparing them for a new life under conditions of commodity money relations. In the 15th to 18th centuries, it was possible for Roman popes to adorn their tombs with characters from ancient Roman mythology. Historians have turned a blind eye to these pagan tombs in St. Peter's Cathedral and do not comment on them in any way. This applies not only to tombs, but also, for example, to some fountains in Rome, where the personal coat of arms of the Pope coexists with blatantly pagan, clearly non-Christian decor. And the same paganism, set against the backdrop of European colonial buildings, but imbued with local Indian specificity, was present in Latin America. This illustration is from the book Religious Ceremonies and Customs of All the Peoples of the World by French writer and publisher Jean-Frédéric Bernard, published in 1735. Why the Roman popes still bear the pagan title Pontifex Maximus, we'll discuss separately another time, as well as why Catholic Christianity contained elements of paganism, such as Minerva, Fortune, Jupiter, and so on, until the 19th century. Until the 20th century, the phrase treasures of Mexico and Peru was a mean used to denote great incalculable wealth. Later, great wealth became most often associated with oil, rich as an Arabian sheik. Each era had its own primary values and images to represent material wealth. In the 16th century, the first century of Europeans' exploration of America, such value was represented by gold and silver of the New World. These metals were used to mint high and medium denomination coins. Let's now talk about them. In 2010, a group of French scientists from the University of Lyon reached out to renowned numismatists, asking them to provide coins from different eras, authenticated by numismatic auction specialists, for laboratory isotopic research. Here are some excerpts from their 2011 report. Estimating global fluxes of precious metals is key to understanding early monetary systems. Pre-1492 European silver can be distinguished from Mexican and Andean metal. The methodology of the French scientists was based on the property of these metals. Mexican and especially Andean silver have a higher content of lead isotopes with atomic mass numbers 207 and 208 than most European mines, with a few rare exceptions. The scientists constructed a diagram of the concentration of these isotopes in coins and in samples of silver from sources of this metal. What surprised them was the discovery that Roman coins, taken from numismatists as a standard of European silver, correspond most closely to the silver from the Potosi mines in present-day Bolivia. From the beginning of the 16th century to the end of the 18th, Mexico and Peru produced about 80% of the world's silver. Of this, 30% eventually ended up in China, which provided Europe with the goods it needed, primarily silk, in exchange for American silver and Chinese porcelain, which historians later moved to the early Middle Ages that they themselves had invented. The Potosi mine in modern-day Bolivia was the world leader in silver production. Scientists posed the question, if 30% of American silver was absorbed by China, where did the remaining 70% go, and why has the most abundant silver in the world, from Potosi, not appeared in Europe, yet it is abundant in Roman coins? And here is the most surprising observation made by French scientists, which I will quote. European Spanish coins from the 16th and early 17th centuries, Charles V to Philip III, show no trace of American metal. This suggests that coins and cobs minted in Mexico and Peru were not reminted into Spanish coinage. Of the silver mined in the Americas, 20% remained on the continent. Another 10% were used to buy Asian silk, porcelain, and spices, while a further 15% fell into the hands of pirates or was smuggled, leaving approximately 200 tons to reach Seville every year during the late 1500s and early 1600s. Philip II defaulted on the Spanish debt in 1557, 1560, 1575, and 1596, and reopened the Rio Tinto and other Spanish silver mines, indicating that American silver did not stay in Spain for long. Translating to plain human language, despite the fact that about 200 tons of silver arrived in Spain annually, the Spanish kings did not mint their coins from this silver until the latter part of the 17th century. It's as if this silver did not belong to them. This is also indirectly suggested by the 4 Spanish defaults in the second half of the 16th century. This occurred despite the fabulous wealth of the Spanish colonies in the New World. So whose silver was it from Potosi that bypassed Charles V, Philip II, and Philip III? We will discuss this in the next film, and also about how Roman coins, the Roman Church, the Holy Inquisition, and the witch hunt are related to this. And especially for those who wish not only to know but also to understand history and its cause and effect relationships, I offer you my book, The Other History of Roman Empire. That's all from me. I appreciate your time and attention, and I wish you all the best. Respectfully, Alexander Tomansky.